Diversity of Life, Investigation 3.1c. This is on plant cell structures. If you'll recall from our last lesson, we were looking at some of the cell structures inside an Elodea plant. We had labeled on our diagram that we submitted the cell wall, which is that rigid outside structure that gives that plant cell its box or brick-like shape. It adds additional support for the plant, allows them to grow tall, taller than even humans, etc. And it just allows for a good rigid outside structure. We also labeled the cytoplasm. That was one of the things inside of it that we could see with that streaming. The cytoplasm, I likened it to the liquid that would be in an aquarium, the water in an aquarium. If the aquarium is a box-like, the glass outside would be the cell wall. The cytoplasm would be the liquid on the inside. And then we had chloroplasts. Those were the little green balls that were found inside the plant cell structure, inside the plant cells that were moving around within it. That would be like other items within the aquarium that are moving within the water, etc. So those are the three things that we all labeled on our plant cell structures. But those aren't the only things that are in the plant cell. Just like an aquarium has lots of other features, etc., just like we as humans have lots of structures inside of us that help us do a job. An individual plant cell, and we're going to find out other cells, all have structures, additional structures inside of them that help them do their jobs. As I just mentioned previously when looking at the Elodea cell, there were structures. We labeled the cell wall, the cytoplasm, and chloroplasts. These are structures we learned to call organelles, and they are parts of the cell that do certain jobs for the cells. We have something similar. Maybe if you've heard the prefix of this word organ, an organ is something inside our human bodies that does a certain job for our bodies. We've added the L part to be cells part to be organelles, or structures inside the cell that help do its specific job. We have organs like a stomach and a liver and kidneys and a brain and a heart and lungs and some of those other things. Those are organs that do specific functions for us as humans to keep us alive. On a smaller scale, cells have many other organelles that do special jobs to keep the cell alive as well. And we're going to focus on some of those cell structures, those organelles as we call them, for plant cells in the next little section here. To do a little more investigation, you're going to go on to fosweb.com, fosweb.com, log in, go to Diversity of Life, and find on the multimedia side this levels of complexity. And it will have a unit over here on this end that will show you kind of a graphic about the levels of complexity. Things get more or less complex as you build on them or tear them down. You're going to want to find the plant cell for each of these. As we mentioned before, this is where you're going to be using to find all of these other different structures in here for plant cells. So what you'll want to do is get to this point, and to help you, each one of these things listed here is a different cell structure that is inside of a plant cell. On the next page, we're going to download that worksheet, the levels of complexity for plant cells structures, and complete it by using this part of the website. You'll now go ahead and download the plant cell structures and function sheets that looks like this. This is a diagram of a typical plant cell. It has some of the labels that we've already looked at, things like cell wall, cytoplasm, chloroplasts, but there's lots of other ones in there as well. What I need you to do is to complete this table of information. It gives you the cell structure on this side. You need to find the function. I'm going to find that by looking at that previous page where it says cells. It gave you plant cells. You're going to find the one that says just below it, cell structures. And on that, it will show a list of all of these different cell structures, and you click on it and it will list the function, which you will then write into the space provided for each one of them. Once that's done, then you'll be turning that one in. Again, here's how you get there. Once you've downloaded the worksheet, you're going to go to Levels of Complexity, the plant cell section. In the left column over here, you're going to find the one called Cellular Structures. This box, the one highlighted. This will then show you all of these different cellular structures we call organelles inside. Click on each one, and that will help you complete the worksheet. As we said, click on each of those organelles and write down the function of each of those cell structures. Like cell wall, we'll have something about it. Mitochondria, we'll have something about it. Complete all of those on that worksheet with its function for each of the organelles that are listed. And you'll be ready to finish that up and turn that in. By the end of the lesson, you'll have a better idea about all of these different vocabulary terms. Things like what a cell is. It's what everything is needed for the living things to have. Part of is a cell, made up of a cell, starting with a cell. Smallest living thing is a cell. And they're part of a much larger organism, like a plant or an animal. Cell membrane, the part of the cell that goes around the outside of the cell, like the first little layer. Cell structures is another word for organelles. Cell wall is a plant cell organ. It's a very rigid one. Chlorophyll is that green pigment that's used by plants to capture sunlight. Chlorophyll is kept in the chloroplast. Chloroplasts hold the chlorophyll, and they move around within the cell wall or in the cell itself. They move around how? They are floating in the cytoplasm. It's a liquid-like material found all throughout the cell that has all of these other ones in it. Elodea is that aquatic plant cell, or plant that we were using to look at its cells. Mitochondria was one of these organelles that we had talked about. It's what the power source of the cell. It gets its power and energy through the mitochondria. And the biggest, most important thing is the nucleus. That's the brain of the entire cell. It organizes information. It tells the cell what to do, how to work, what to let in, what to let out, what other structures. It lets all these different organelles, tells them what and how to work. So those are the vocabularies for this particular lesson. So again, we can go back to our focus question that we started out with. What are the microscopic structures that make up organisms such as Elodea or Elodea? They are, yes, tiny organelles. And as we go through these different lessons, looking at different types and different examples of living things, we will see some of them have these organelles in common, and some will be different. Plant cells might be different than us. We are obviously different than plants. So what structures in a plant cell might be different than what we have as humans or other living things? That'll be the focus of our next lessons. Thank you, everybody.